Chris here, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to my spring covers vlog. If you're new to my channel, I do a series where I pick 5 books from my physical TBR whose cover gives me the vibe of the season we're in, and then I do this vlog where I talk about the books, whether I enjoyed them, and whether they were actually set in the season that I predicted they would be. So I have actually started one of them finally. This is way overdue because we're already a good chunk into spring, and that is The Story Web by Megan Fraser Blakemore. And I can tell you this is not set in spring at all. We're actually in the fall, and we're following this girl named Alice whose dad has left, and at the beginning we don't quite know where he's gone, but we know he was very important to Alice, and we know that she has seen the story web in the forest and has kind of forgotten about it. And as we progress through the story, we realize that the story web is real and it is very important, and it links the humans and the animals, and something is happening to it, and Alice may be the only person that can help it. We get several other points of view. Our main ones are Lewis and Melanie, who are classmates of Alice, though we do occasionally get chapters from an animal's point of view because they are very important to the story. I am on page 206 and I'm really enjoying this. I had to force myself to put it down last night so that I could go to bed. I almost read it in one sitting. I really like seeing things from Alice's perspective and kind of slowly discovering what is going on with her dad and why she's behaving the way that she is, and learning very slowly about the story web. I think that Lewis and Melanie's chapters are important too. Melanie is known as the niece of a witch. There are tons of rumors around her town that her aunt is a witch, so that creates a certain kind of superstition and vibe with the way people treat her. And Lewis is a former friend of Alice, as Alice is struggling and has kind of shut out all of her friends, and he doesn't really know why and wishes he had more answers. And it is very intriguing to see these different points of view, because you're getting a different point of view about what's going on with Alice and the town and the story web. And I like the idea that all of our stories are important and they get woven into this web, and it somehow connects everything, and that if this web is damaged, it could be very damaging for the world. So I'm really into this story, and I'm very curious to see how it ends and how the story wraps up. But not set in spring, so a big feel with that, but I'm enjoying the story, which is more important, I guess. I mean, maybe not for this vlog, because like the whole idea is to pick books that will hopefully be set in the season. So I failed with that, but I'm enjoying the book. So in the greater scheme of things, I think that's the more important bit. So I will check back in with you all probably later tonight to let you know what I thought of this. So it is now August 2nd, and I have not 1, not 2, but 3 updates for you. First off, I finished the story web, and I'm giving this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed getting to see Alice's journey and seeing how the magic of this world worked, and seeing her relationship with her classmates and getting their points of view and the animals' points of view, and getting that interconnectedness between animals and humans. There was a lot more to this book than meets the eye, and the story behind what's going on with Alice's dad was quite intriguing and really added to this book. I loved it. The only drawback is that I'm doing a video about spring covers, and while this cover does indeed give me spring vibes, it was not set in spring, which means I'm 0 for 5. Then I read The 10,000 Doors of January. So in this book, we're following a girl named January who is living in this kind of like old mansion type place with a man named Mr. Locke, and her father is employed by Mr. Locke, and her father goes out on like archaeological journeys to find rare items and artifacts to bring back to Mr. Locke, who then sells them to clientele or keeps them for his own personal collection. And we start with her being a little girl and work our way up through her life, and she ends up finding this book that talks about these doors that people can travel through. So she ends up reading these stories, and she is very interested in these doors. And it's kind of her haven, because she's never quite felt at home with Mr. Locke, even though she really does care about him. And it's just kind of the way she escapes when she feels like she doesn't quite fit in. This is a historical fiction fantasy, and part of the reason she feels like she doesn't fit in is because she is a mixed race person living in a time when your whiteness is very, very important. And that definitely influences how people treat her throughout the story. I can tell you that while there were tiny bits and pieces that did happen during spring, this was really a book focused on the breadth of January's life. So we got to see all different sorts of seasons. So I would say it does not count as being set in the season of spring. And I'm giving this a 3.5 star rating, which bums me out because after the first 20 pages, I was so intrigued that I was getting 5-star vibes, and then it just tanked. This book dragged. The whole middle section, I was like, okay. Because she finds this book where she's reading about the doors, and I'm waiting for the doors to become this, like, big deal. And I felt like I just spent so much time waiting for it. And I don't know, I wanted so much more from this, and I didn't hate it by any stretch of the imagination, and I liked like the writing style, but I just needed it to be a bit more fast-paced than it was. 3.5 stars, not set in spring. That means I'm now still 0 for 5. Technically, you could see it as 0 for 2, but I'm going 0 for 5 because I'm reading 5 books, and I wanted to see how many out of those 5 are going to be spring covers, so 0 for 5. And then I read Marigolds and Murder. Another book that was not set in the season of spring. We're actually in October leading up to Halloween, and we're following a woman named Lacey who has moved to a small town of Port Danby and is getting ready to open up a flower shop. She has broken off a relationship with her ex who was cheating on her, and she's kind of rather well known in her field that she left because she has the ability to kind of have a super sense of smell. I don't remember what it's called. There is a name for that, but she has a very strong sense of smell. So she was working with him, I think it was like perfume company, and just wanted a change of pace after they broke up. So she's moved to this small town and opens up a flower shop. And one of the things that's coming up is a big pumpkin contest where you're trying to grow like the largest pumpkin. And she ends up coming across the body of one of the participants face down in her gigantic pumpkin. And so Lacey decides to get involved and use her super smell to help her sleuth out what happened to this woman and who killed her. I think I'm going 3.75 stars on this. It was a good start to the series. It introduced a lot of the characters. And I like that we didn't jump in with Lacey immediately knowing who everybody was, while simultaneously having people kind of forget that she doesn't know who everyone is because it's such a small town that they're used to people knowing each other. It's also interesting because her shop is in between a coffee shop and a bakery, so we get a lot of scent descriptions because she's constantly smelling these tantalizing scents, and it's really interesting to learn about her super smell and how that's affected her throughout her life. She also has a pet raven and a pet cat, and I really enjoyed their contributions. I definitely plan to continue on with this series and see what kind of mysteries Lacey continues to solve. And yeah, it wasn't my favorite cozy mystery, but it was enjoyable enough that I will continue on with the series. Unfortunately, though, with it not being set in spring, that means I'm 0 for 5 still, or 0 for 3, however you would like to look at it, which means I have 2 books left. I haven't started either one of them, but I hope to get to them soon. And when I have, I will check back in with you, and hopefully I will have better luck and at least one of them will be set in spring, because otherwise, man, did I choose awful books for this round of spring covers when it comes to finding books that were actually set in the season. So this is a long overdue final clip for this vlog. I have finally finished my last 2 books for this spring covers vlog, and it's been actually several weeks since I finished them, but I'm finally sitting down to talk about them. The first is The Things We Do for Love by Kristen Hanna, and this book is not set in spring. I mean, there are tiny bits of it that are set in spring, but it takes place over an entire year. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It is easily my least favorite Kristen Hanna. In this book, we're following 2 points of view. We have Angie, who has just gotten divorced and is moving back to her family's home to help take care of their restaurant. She's gone through a lot of things. In addition to the divorce, she lost her dad. She had been trying to get pregnant and just really, really struggled with that and wasn't capable of having a healthy child. and is just in a very, very bad place when she ends up meeting a teen named Lauren. She ends up hiring Lauren to work at her family's restaurant, and Lauren is I think 17-year-old girl who is in her final year of school, and her mom is just not a good mom. Lauren is the one that is really predominantly taking care of things at home and paying the bills and keeping a roof over their heads and food in their bellies, and she is really, really struggling and ends up meeting Angie, who is kind of looking for somebody to nurture, and that person happens to be Lauren, and they kind of bond over that. And I don't know, I just couldn't get into this book. I kind of saw where it was going. Like, nothing in this book surprised me. I pretty much pegged what was going to happen from the very beginning, and it played out pretty much exactly as I expected it to. That's not to say that it wasn't necessarily well written, because I do like Kristen Hanna's writing, and I do like the way she writes characters, but I don't know, for the first time, this was just a miss for me, and I didn't connect the way I usually do. It's the first book of hers that hasn't made me cry. And yeah, it starts, I think, in fall. Oh no, it was May. It starts in spring, but like I said, it spans an entire year, so I don't think that I can really count that because, well, I don't think that's fair. Because the idea is I'm looking for a book that's predominantly set in spring, and this definitely wasn't. It's kind of like the 10,000 Doors of January in that regard. Like, there are parts of it that are set in spring, but it spans such a long time period that I don't think it's really fair to say that it was set in spring. So that would make me, I believe, 0 for 4. I picked some crap books this time around based on their covers. And then the last book I had to read was Wild Beauty. And I'm going to say that, yes, this book was set in spring. It might be summer by the end of it. It's hard to tell, but it definitely starts in spring. And I'm going to count it because I've had 2 books that have elements of being set in spring. And this one, I think the majority of it, at the very least, is set in spring. So in this book, we're following 5 girls. Let's see, I will never remember their names. Gloria, Dahlia, Calla, Azalea, and Australia. And Australia is our main character, and these 5 girls are part of a family that has basically been cursed. They're able to make plants bloom and encourage gardens to grow, but unfortunately, the people they love always disappear. So if they fall in love with somebody, they tend to disappear, never to return. And all of their kids tends to be girls. There's 5 girls born to each generation, and these girls don't want that to happen because they all happen to be in love with the same girl. And so they essentially make a wish and give some prized possessions to the land, and a boy shows up. And their whole family falls in love with him, but they have no idea where he came from and whether it's going to be enough to keep the girl they love safe. And then our second point of view is the young boy who wakes up having no idea where he is, who he is, or really anything about him, and has to try to kind of piece together his past and how he came to be on this land with these girls. So I'm giving this book 3.75 stars. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed a lot of the characters. I can tell you that, like I said, it's been a few weeks since I've read it, and a lot of the finer details have faded. So it's not a book that I think is going to stick with me. I feel like in a year or so, I could probably reread this book and wouldn't remember much. That being said, I did enjoy getting to see Estrella's relationship with her sisters and her mom and her aunts and her grandmothers. Well, her grandmother and her grandmother's cousins, or however it works out. But there is a whole crew of this family living there, and I liked getting to see how the magic worked with them being able to bring like plants to life, and the love they had for this girl, and how it affected each of the 5 of them, and how they kind of displayed that, and how it changed the story and changed them. I really enjoyed following the young boy Fel. That's what he ends up calling himself, and seeing how he kind of pieces together his past and how he figures out who he is and what he wants in life. And the writing was very pretty, and it was really easy to get into and kind of read through, though I would say it was probably flowery. So if you don't like flowery writing, you're probably not going to enjoy this book. I think this is the second book I read by Anna Marie McLemore, and if I remember correctly, I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of that one either. Let me see. Do they have a book list in here? I think it was When the Moon Was Ours. because there is a also by her in here. So if I remember correctly, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of that one, and I literally could not tell you what that book was about at all. I think it might have had something to do with a water tower. I could be wrong. But yeah, I feel like this is a book that's not going to stick with me. So I think 3.75 stars is fair because I enjoyed the book, but it's definitely not a new fave, and I can't see myself rereading it. And like I said, it's not going to stick with me. But it was set in spring, so I got 1 for 5. Really, really bad. Not my best month. So a quick reminder, because, I mean, I know you guys just watched the video and heard me talk about it, but I didn't. So I'm going to run through it real quick. So we started with the story web, which I gave 4.5 stars and was not set in the season of spring. Then I read Marigolds and Murder, and I gave this 3.75 stars, and this was also not set in spring. Then I read the 10,000 Doors of January, and I gave this 3.5 stars, and it was not set in spring technically. There were bits and pieces that were set in spring, but the majority of it was not set in spring. Then I read The Things We Do for Love, and I gave this 3 stars, and there were, again, bits and pieces that were set in spring, but the majority of it wasn't. And then I read Wild Beauty, which I gave 3.75 stars, and was the one and only book that I got that was set in spring. At least the majority of it was, I believe. Not my best picks. I mean, I think that's the worst I've done since I started doing this. I only got 1 out of the 5 as being in the correct season. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my reasoning was, like, I mentioned, like, she looked like she was dressed for the cold, but not, like, cold, which is true, because it was only the beginning of fall, and I was thinking it was more, like, the end of spring. I was right that this was a character named January and not the month of January, so I got that right at least. This one I just bombed on. And then Marigolds and Murder, I believe I mentioned that the trees gave me fall vibes, which if I had picked for my fall covers, I would have been right because it was set in fall, but I will always associate Marigolds with spring. So I had some pretty good reasoning and I was close. If I had just maybe picked the other opposite end of the spectrum, though, to be fair, these two I couldn't have counted for any season, no matter which season I picked. So there was no way I was going to get it right on these ones, no matter which list I put them on. I will also say, for the most part, it feels like a very kind of middle of the road. The only book that really stood out is the story web. It was the only one I really enjoyed and could see myself rereading. So not my best choices for that regard either, but it is over and done with now, and I can move on to my spring covers. Hopefully I will do better with that one. And yeah, that's it for this vlog. I don't know if any of you picked a book or books with spring covers, but if you did, I'd love to know how right you were in the comment section below. All of my social media is listed in the description below if you'd like to come chat with me. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me spring emojis, like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!